If you had a walk-in song, what would it be?
How about Hit Me With Your Best Shot?
Oh, that's a good one.
I'm Billy Mitchell,
And I'm Megan Metzger.
and this is CTRL ALT DEFENSE. Radha, welcome to our podcast. You're one of our first guests, and we're really excited to have you on. You most recently were the Chief Digital and AI Officer at the Pentagon, which is a really cool, interesting, and exciting role, but you are gone now, and I think you have some time to yourself, and we're curious, as we start out and get
Really
to know
hoping
you
now
a
you'll
little bit.
say all the things you wouldn't say before. I'm
I
just
said a lot of things before.
I'm just so curious. What do you do now that you're not the CDAO of the Pentagon? How do you spend your days? Are you binging TV? You just reclaiming your life? What's going on?
Well, at first, when I left the government, mostly what I did was take naps. I'm like a world-class
very nice.
napper, and I
That's
was
nice.
like doing 2 naps a day. It was great.
2 a day. Wow.
You could like wake up, work out a little, take a nap, get ready, eat some lunch,
I
take a
think you
nap.
earned
Right?
those
Like
naps.
we can really do it. Now I'm down to like 1 nap a day.
1 nap.
So I'm like going through basically like when you're a baby and you drop a nap. And then instead, I'm like a kind of high-end chauffeur for my children to take
Nice.
them to various activities and then other activities and then another activity and then a play date and then a party and then another activity. And so between that, I like to listen to audiobooks. I'm really into cozy mysteries. So they're like set in the Victorian or Regency era. You know, you got some subtle innuendo, some ladies
look
fighting
out.
crime. I mean, it's a good time.
I need your list because I always...
Nothing too stressful.
No, I always feel like when I actually have time to read or listen to an audiobook, I should be productive. So they're usually business or leadership books. And at some
Same.
point, I'm like, I'm not thinking about this right.
Yeah.
I need a...
Yeah, I went
cozy
all the way.
mystery.
Like these are not
Full trash.
growing me as a person in any way.
That's okay. That's what this time is for right now. You've done a lot. You get to enjoy yourself now.
This is
Cozy
some
mysteries.
Cozy mysteries.
All right.
Slightly sassy. What did you say? Do you
Provocative.
do you listen to
Innuendo?
it while you're an unpaid Uber driver?
Yes,
for your
I do.
children?
I do.
Okay.
Sometimes I mostly listen to it while sitting in the car waiting to move them between activities, waiting for my next call.
Yeah.
I try to listen to it with them in the car, but they're not quiet.
Yeah.
Summarize them like
There
that.
was a time recently when I thought about all the times I made my mom sit in the car while
Yeah.
she was taking me to things and how guilty I felt
Did
about
you
that recently.
You
And
called
I was
her
like,
immediately and said, I'm
I
so
did,
sorry.
yeah, and I was just like, wow, that's a good mom. So you must
Yeah.
be a great mother.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
based
thank
on
you.
my own metrics on that.
So I have another fun question before we talk about, all of the great stuff we're going to talk about today. If you had a walk-in song, what would it be?
How about Hit Me With Your Best Shot?
Oh, that's a good one.
There you go.
Billy's will surprise you. Are you
Well,
going to change it?
so I'm going to change it. Last time I'm all over the place in terms of music. Last time it was a 3-6 Mafia song. You got to stay fly. Not going to sing it again like I did last time. This time I'm a Virginia Tech Hokie. This dawned on me after you asked me the last time. There's only one answer I should have, and it's Enter Sandman. That's what they play when the football team comes in, and it's the best entrance in all of college football.
I just put money on Sandman and Preakness because
Interesting.
I like Inner Sandman.
Yeah, you should put it on
I'm not a
journalism.
Hokie, though.
I mean, I feel like the alternative pathway I could go through, and I couldn't choose between them, is the variety of Taylor Swift songs, all
Okay.
of which I could.
All of them.
You could
yeah.
do Reputation. You could do The Man. That would be a good one.
Yeah. Big reputation. Got a
Yeah.
big reputation. Okay. I like that one.
What's yours?
That's my vote.
You can't sneak away from the question.
I mean, I could. Okay, I'm gonna say one that no one will probably know, but there's a song called "Destruction" by Joywave, and the intro, you just want to like walk down a hallway like a badass, and just like open a door and be like, "I'm here."
Yeah.
Yeah. So go listen to it, and then I bet
Yeah.
you're gonna want to practice a walk-in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to ask this to every guest from now on, and I think we're going to try to play.
I'm gonna
it at
need
the
to
end.
come up with a longer list
Yeah,
of songs.
this is what I spend my free time now. I was thinking of what my walk-up song
What your
could be.
yeah. Yeah.
But that was a good answer. Off the
Excellent.
cuff, it was a
All right, good.
good
Okay.
go-to. And Taylor Swift is also a great backup. So, it seems like you're keeping yourself busy with the kids and enjoying yourself, naps and such. But, we'd love to take it back to your role as the CDAO. I think we'd like to get an understanding of how you came into that role. You came into it from a different role, and it wasn't like a direct funnel in terms of AI and digital stuff. You were in the acquisition space, I believe. So how did you find yourself, being asked to join as the CDAO? What was sort of the pitch they gave you? Go do this, go fix things. What was sort of the direction or the...
Were you voluntold? Did you self-elect?
So just by way of backstory, before coming into government, I had actually worked at Facebook, then Facebook, now Meta, and Google in a range of sort of technical applied data and analytics roles. My background is I have a PhD in economics, but it really focused on quantitative methods and statistics. So I had this sort of data-oriented background. When I came into the department in 2021, I was actually chief of staff to the then Deputy Secretary Hicks, who had a really strong modernization agenda. And a big piece of that was using data for things like everywhere else in the world. Yeah. And the department really wasn't doing that at scale. So we, in those first few years with her leadership, really, there was a lot of focus, and I had the opportunity to really help shape and drive some strategic initiatives related to data and AI, including the creation of the CDAO. And then, I moved out of that chief of staff role and into the acquisition role, which really also does have a big role to play in the software and digital modernization of the department, because the primary way the department is going to modernize is by buying modern things that work instead of
There's an idea.
Instead of outdated things that don't. So, I had been doing work in there, and there was, the previous CDAO, Craig Martell, was planning to transition out, and they needed someone who had that sort of digital background and information, but also knew the department and the department's processes. I think, the first 2 years of CDAO were really dealing with a merger of organizations and then building this foundation of data infrastructure, data architecture, and kind of making that real. And then what we needed to do was take the next, step of that was, how do we get this to scale? And that means scaled delivery, scaled contracts, scaled workforce. And so that was really charge. And that's kind of what I am interested in, is how do you bring those pockets of solutions and actually bring them to scale at an enterprise level?
Let me ask a little bit of a personal question, because I can imagine if you're like me, if I have a big decision like that, I do my pro-con list. And, you were in career positions, really high-profile career positions. And then obviously this one, you knew that it was going to be a short-term kind of thing, depending on which way the election went. So how did that play into your calculus? Was the mission just so compelling that was in your pro list, you wanted to go tackle it? And I know scale is something you're really good at. Kind of walk me through a little bit of your pro-con list.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of different things going on. One was, I think there is really a moment right now we're in, and we were in a year ago, where AI, the promise of AI is there, but the realization of that promise is not, which is, how do you actually find the technology that does the useful things that you want it to do? And so that was a super exciting mission, I think, is piece one. Piece two is, leadership needed the help, and they asked me, and I'm think Deputy Secretary Hicks is one of the great leaders of the Pentagon, probably one of the greatest that they've ever had. And Secretary Austin was a terrific advocate for CDAO. And I think, when leaders like that ask you to do something, you're inclined to
You
say
generally
yes.
go do it. Yep.
Yes. I think for me, the big downsides were really changing jobs, kind of close to, I had already been in for 3 years, so I was pretty tired then. And so taking on a new thing was going to be a lot.
Start a whole new marathon at that point. Yeah.
And then, just the, needing to learn and understand a whole new org and a whole new set of issues, and how to navigate that. And so that was, something that in the end seemed worth it. I love a good fixer-upper, and there was some fixing up to do. And so that's what we did.
That's exactly how Megan described you earlier. Is you love to fix things.
She's incredible at it. Yeah. Now, When you first moved over, I know you came out of the gate really strong. We had MOU signed with DIU. I mean, you got to work. What did you get really right, and what did you get really wrong?
So I think I'll start with my going in principle was basically three things. One is we can't be recreating the wheel. Like, it's already confusing enough. If someone has figured out how to do something, let's just do it. So the MOU, for instance, with DIU was just, I don't want to create a whole commercial outreach section and process to get things. Like, I will just use their things to buy the stuff I want, right? So just as an example, I think that worked really well. I also think our sort of signature work on Open Dagger, which we launched, I don't know, 1 month in as well, where was kind of like a duh moment, right? Of course, we don't want to, buy the same iPhone every single time with 5 apps, and every time I want a new app, replace it. We want to be able to replace what we're using and have it be modular and interoperable, and let us start thinking about how to do that. One is, I wish we had more time to really get the overall Advana program onto a healthier footing. I think you'll see an RFP will come out here, I think soon, I hope, and that'll help kind of migrate it into a much more healthy multi-vendor ecosystem. But, that program sort of grew bigger than it was designed to do. And I understood that from a technical architecture point, and we spent a lot of time making it more stable, but I didn't quite get to the sort of acquisition side of it as early as I wanted to. And I think the other thing we really didn't get right was didn't spend enough time on a number of the personnel issues. And I think, mergers are hard, and we were combining a lot of cultures, and we just, there were acute issues, and those are going to go through their process. But there's the broader sort of corporate environment, or in that case, defense environment, and getting all those people to work together in coherent ways is hard and needed a lot more listening and a lot less just kind of like, let's get to work. And I could have taken more of a beat in the beginning to do that listening.
Yeah. Well, we had this on our list for probably way later in this segment, but you said merger, so I'm going to take the opening until we have signals. You'll give me the hand signal, like, be cool, Megan. We see a lot of that going on right now across the department. We're going to see mergers of 4-star commands. I know there's rumors around how PEOs and all the different services might come together. I mean, tell me the biggest takeaways. You talked about some of the challenges, but the DOD, I would say, has gone through mergers before. Sometimes we're good at them. Sometimes we're very not good at them. We're good at moving boxes, maybe making some processes and some layers, but it's so much more than that. What did we learn? Like, what can we not step in again?
I think there are a couple of different things. One is the theory of the case for a reorg, I think, has to be a sort of form follows function kind of approach. Like, here is the mission we're trying to accomplish. Here is the form of the organization that is going to accomplish it. And I think sometimes we don't do a good enough job explaining how the form is linked to the function. And so people are like, why move my box?
Yeah, what does
I
it
like
get
my
us?
box.
Yeah.
Don't take my box. So that's, I think, piece one. Piece two, though, and kind of the flip side of it is, I think sometimes we're a little too deferential and slow in these processes, and we'd be just better off just ripping the Band-Aid off. Like, look, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening. Explain it, and then just do it. You don't need to talk about it. It doesn't need to linger. It just get it. And I think if we normalize that in a form, like, hey, look, the mission is evolving. As the mission evolves, our organizational structure has got to evolve, or we will not have a form that matches the function we need to do. And I think we have to normalize that more. And I think we do a lot more hand-wringing about this, and they should. And this is sort of, which is not to say you should take on reorgs lightly. Like, they are disruptive. They can be confusing. Yeah. But it's just, if one is necessary, then you should do it. And if it's not necessary, then you just shouldn't bother, and you should focus on other ways you can drive change.
Sure. Hot take.
Very hot take. I think another thing we mentioned, and it feeds into that perfectly, is we see so much right now about that disruption, bringing people who are non-traditional in to lead the disruption. But you were somebody who had been inside the building, who knew the space well, and how to navigate, the organizational structure and the bureaucracy in a sense. So as we see folks brought in from Silicon Valley or other places in this current administration to kind of lead some of that reorg, that merger, like what are the pros and cons of each? You know, somebody being familiar with the space and then having somebody who can pull the Band-Aid off because they're used to doing that in the private sector.
So I'd like to just start with, do you think disruption is good? Like, do you want disrupted electricity? Do you want disrupted water? Would you like your house to experience a disruption?
As
Your
someone
car?
that just had my electricity go out this week, no.
So and if there's going to be a disruption in service, you probably want the other side of it to involve some kind of improved outcome, service, action.
Blip in electricity, but I ended up with solar or something like
right,
that.
like we're going to turn off your water, but we're taking all the lead out of the pipes, right? Like you want something on the back end there.
Yeah.
I say that because a lot of times we focus on the disruption part of it and not on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So great if you can come in and rip the Band-Aid off, cool. But if you need to do some stitches on the wound underneath, I'd really like someone who knows how to do stitches and not just let the patient bleed out.
I had a friend cut my stitches out once. Nope.
Yeah,
I'm with you on that one.
And I say that because, you know, we go around like, oh, it's so great. We're disrupting this. We're disrupting in the desert. We're disrupting in the ocean. We're disrupting in the air. We're, you know, all domain disruption.
Those are
it's
scary
great.
places to be disrupted.
And so my view on this is I actually don't think there's a good or bad. Look, bureaucracies and managing people and processes exists in the government and exists out. And in any of these places, you got to learn what you're doing, right? And so if you're coming from Silicon Valley and coming in and you've had to figure out how to take your startup idea, get funders, get capital, match it to talent, scale that up, get your product delivered to customer, get that feedback, increase your production based on, right? Like you've had to figure out a bunch of things. These are not, this is not to minimize that experience. That then has to be translated to the government. And that's great if you can figure out how to do that or surround yourself or get advisors or however you want to do that. And flip side, you're inside the government, you know how the processes work, but you might not have enough connectivity to the new ideas, the new technology, the new whatever is out there. So you're going to have to you got to figure out how you're going to do that, how you're going to match the disruption with the creative reconstruction. And I think that pairing is critical. And that pairing is not going to exist. It shouldn't and can't exist in a single form of a human or even a couple humans. It's got to exist from a team that works together and brings their expertise and skills in. And I think that is something, you know, I'm really proud of the Biden administration team at the Department of Defense. They actually did have a lot of that talent that they mixed and matched, and some of the best folks. And I hope, you know, for the department and for the country that we're able to do that again with a different set of folks and a different set of skills and priorities. But it can't just be disruption.
Yeah. I like how you said it's the team approach. I've been in many debate of if we're going to bring in Silicon Valley, whether they're venture or PE, and a lot of the appointees coming in have that background, and there can be some beautiful outside perspectives in all of that. And I've been in many debates like, well, should they be the lead with a deputy or do you flip it? But your point is it can't just be dependent on those two people, however that sits. Bake those things into the culture, into the fabric of an entire organization to really make it work. I think that's a fascinating point. It's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic really works because you have a lot of that going on right now, and it could be a beautiful thing.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, we were talking before this. We're not sure what the CDAO is going to look like next. There's been ups and downs in terms of whether it's going to be restructured or that's not happening. Regardless of where we end up, you sat in that role where you probably have some opinions about what it should look like for, you know, optimal success and it to really be running the way it should. What's that look like? So as we think about the disruption you just described and sort of, you know, how that works with that team and sort of that optimal structure. We've heard a lot about how the CDAO could or could not be going through its own restructuring currently. That's sort of to come, and we'll see if it does. But I'm curious, you know, whether it does or not, you've been in that role, you've led that team, you probably have your own opinions about how that team should be structured. And so if you were queen for a day, so to speak, what would that look like? How would you want the CDAO to look for optimal results within the Pentagon?
Yeah, I mean, I think the CDAO has some core functions it has to do. So it has to deliver the sort of enterprise stack, right? And that's the compute, the data infrastructure, the data integrations, a lot of the data governance that happens with this chief data officer hat. So stuff that is not sexy, but is what makes things work. Like you have to share your data. What does that mean? And what's the process if you don't want to? When we were there, we had this memo on data sharing by default. People are like, wait, what?
And I'm sure that made everyone very
so
uncomfortable.
happy. So that's one piece. So that is sort of what I would call scaled capability delivery. Then I think you want it to be sort of accelerating, seeding the marketplace with activities. And so we do that in priority mission areas. So advanced C2, which is really the way we integrate all of the data and information to help our warfighters make decisions faster and better. And then we stood up the AI rep capability cell and whatever you call it, but it is that how do we take AI solutions from the outside world and integrate them into DOD problems? And so you need to have those, what we call the scale and the speed functions for sure. There are other enabling functions, the sort of policy functions, international partners, the acquisition pieces, trade wins that could live in CDAO, but don't need to. And I think, there is a reason when CDAO is constructed as something that is appointed by the secretary. It's it is intended to be evolutionary by its nature. The JAIC and DDS, they needed to evolve to match the scale at which transformation had to happen. But that doesn't mean they weren't useful and successful organizations for the time they were in and deeply necessary to get to the point where you could scale things, right? So we have a tendency to see these reorgs and these missions and these things as like a negative, or, this thing is failing and this thing, and so we're going to kludge them together. And so it's a roundabout way of answering. I think, as the deputy secretary, the new deputy secretary and the leadership team there is thinking, hey, what do I want digital transformation to look like? Then they can, look at their execution arm with $1 billion budget in the CDAO and say, hey, what do I want you to be doing for me on data and AI? And what do I need you to do to digitally transform this department? And if that means that CDAO contracts or expands or merges with something or doesn't, that doesn't mean that the CDAO that was there for 4 years was bad or good. It just means that now the mission has to evolve. And to our earlier point, the form has to follow that function. And so that, I think, to take some of the emotion out of it, that's where I think it needs to go, is what is the question? If we're trying to scale AI delivery, then that organization is going to look different than rapid capability prototyping and piloting AI, right?
Yeah.
And it should.
It's interesting because it sounds, obviously having started and been at the start of a lot of companies now, what you're talking about is true in the private sector.
Yeah.
Like the people that you usually hire to start something and then the skill sets that you need to scale something, they're not always the same, and you evolve and you adapt and you shift along the way. And I'm going to come back to that because I have a question for you since you've been in and out of government before. I'm curious about the relationship between the CDAO of the Pentagon, which you were, and then, I've engaged with CDAOs of CENTCOM and all the COCOMs and all the services. What should that relationship look like? And where should the authorities lie? Because a lot of times you find CDAOs that don't necessarily have budget, but you need them to do things. And when do they tap into you? Does that make sense? Like that's where I think maybe people in that seat aren't even totally clear.
Yeah, and I, to be honest, I don't think there is a per se right answer. Here are a couple of things that I learned out of there. One, you got to get the CDAOs out of the CIO because you need maybe the way to say it is you need the people who are making your pipes to make your pipes. Yeah. And then the people who are deciding the water, what water comes in, to focus on the water supply, right? But you can't have the people on the water supply doing the pipes and vice versa. And that was kind of the idea of breaking the data and the network pieces apart. And that has to happen, which means if you're a COCOM and you've nested your CDAO under your 6, you've got a missed opportunity.
Sure.
So that, I think, is one piece. The second piece is, we have these CDAO councils that pulled together in a very traditional government bureaucratic kind of way. Like, I think they're monthly, they might be quarterly meetings where the CDAOs from the combatant commands, and that there are also CDAOs in the service military departments. Yep. They meet and we talk about issues and we help solve things. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer to what these look like. We, for instance, worked a lot with the CDAO at SOCOM because We had a lot of similar areas of interest. We were interested in how they were scaling. We worked whenever they needed it with the CTO in CENTCOM, and the CDAO kind of plugged into that on like, hey, you got some things happening there. Can we help with some data integrations? Like, what are you missing? Right? Like, so I think my general philosophy of what the OSD, so in DOD, you know, there's this layer, the Office of Secretary of Defense, that's really the layer intended to support the sort of joint and cross-cutting functions, the enterprise-wide functions. And so my view on where the authority should lie is wherever it gets it done fastest and cheapest, sort of, right? And so there are times when you want to buy things for the whole department, and it makes sense to put it at that central layer. There are lots of times when things should be bought at the local level and administered at the local level and, you know, comport to some reasonable principles. But other than that, and that is just harkening all the way back, like that was one of the features of this sort of open Dagger ecosystem, which is like, hey, if you can have a modular and interoperable system and you have sort of API layers that allow you to connect in, then where it makes sense to have enterprise scale, like, of course, let's do that. Let's use our size to get leverage on pricing. But if there's something that meets a specific mission need, the CDAO shouldn't be the gatekeeper of that, right? And so I think it's more of a yes and than an either or.
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on. Well, especially in this environment, but we spend a lot of time with the programs we support, like helping remove layers. You know, when you start adding in too many, you've gone away from the C2 missions and the soldiers and the warfighters that actually need to know whether or not they're moving safely in the battlefield. Like, you've interviewed a ton of CDAOs as a publication. Have you, like...
I'm curious because it seems like the ones you're mentioning, and I'm sure there's a plethora of them, but it seems like some of those are the personalities. Like, it's the people who are leaning into the mission and are really good at their job. I mean, when you mentioned CENTCOM and the CTO there, they were a very forward-leaning and innovative organization. So that's what I see. It's really, it depends on the person a lot of times who wants to partner and sort of lean into the mission and get something done quickly and think outside of the box.
Yeah. Well, I think you saw it a lot if you look at some of the stuff that like the 18th Airborne did. And it really was a mix of like those partnerships and tapping into the other organizations, whether it was ECMA at that time or the CDAO, to like get it done. Yeah. And I think that's probably what's more important than where it actually lies.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the only two caveats I would say are, one, you don't want like 18 different elements all buying the same thing with one-off tweaks and not able to share it. One, because just wasting money. And two, because they're almost surely going to be harder to connect them to each other because that's the way we write contracts. But two, and to your point, I think, you know, this is where the knee in the curve is going to be. When we get beyond it being personality driven, because I think you're right, it is. And I think if you have people who have appetite for change, they can figure out a way to make a change. And if you have people who are happy to coast along, they will coast along. And until you make it uncomfortable to coast, you're not going to be able to kind of have widespread pushes for transformation. And I think that's the piece you want.
You mentioned transformation, so I'm going to come back to a question I promised I would. I meander sometimes. That's okay. But, okay, transformation. So you've been a part of some pretty gnarly transformation inside the department. You've been at places like Meta and Google. Now you're back out in. Is it really that different? You know, when you start talking about, you know, how do we start moving and acting like commercial companies who transform quickly? Is it that different? Is it really, you know, where's the differences there?
So I actually think it's not that different. I think in the government, the way I would think about it is there are highly regulated sectors and less regulated sectors. The government is a highly regulated sector, but there are other ones like financial,
energy,
right? Healthcare. And so, you know, I actually think transformation, like the process of transformation, I'll take AI transformation because that's what I know. The playbook to get you from where you are with sort of little pockets of innovation to scaled adoption has roughly the same chapters. But the specific ways you get through that chapter are going to depend on your bureaucracy, your funding, your approval chain, right? All of those things. And you got to figure out how to work them in your system. Some of, like, rather than reinventing the wheel, taking a minute to say, hey, like, what worked and what didn't. And, you know, when I came into the CDAO, I did a round of calls with a bunch of the commercial like large scale enterprises, just to be like, hey, like, big bank, You did not start with the like modern digital ecosystem. You've been around for some time. What'd you do? Like, how'd you do it? Hey, like large transportation company, you didn't start with you've been around for a while. How did you move from where you were to now?
At some point, it was 1992, and we were all there.
Right. And so I think, I think there's a lot that the government, of course, can and should learn from the commercial sector, but there's also a lot the commercial sector can learn from the government, especially as you see pockets of the government, I'll take the Department of Defense going through their, experimentation series to go from sort of ideation to scaled adoption in 18 months, as we did on the minimum viable capability for CJAD C2, right? The command and control systems architecture and applications. That's something that, you've got hundreds of people, thousands of people in dozens of commands all around the world, real time, using the same sort of data and digital AI. And you did that through these iterative, agile experimentation cycles. You can totally apply that to other sectors too. And so having more, I think what's really missing is more crosstalk on what are those similarities, what can we learn, and how can we take those lessons to accelerate what we're doing, rather than kind of continue each to figure out those, like we're writing the same book over and over again, right, in each of these different places.
And it turns out humans are in all of them.
Humans are in all of them. And they are part of the solution.
This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Radha.
Thanks for having me.